You've reached the Signal Watch, movies, television, comics, and more. I'm your host, Ryan Steens. Join me and our cadre of co-contributors as we examine cultural artifacts of the 20th century, boldly explore the 21st, and try to put it all in perspective. Stay tuned. We're gonna try to make this work. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Signal Watch. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Steens, and with me today is
Justin Lincoln. Hello all.
Yeah, Justin and I are not in the same physical space. He's way far north in the city of Austin. I'm way far south, and so we are using the power of the internet to speak to each other. Anyway, we're back to do another noir movie, and you selected
Gemini, a recent film. I saw it in 2017. They showed it at Fantastic Fest, and I liked it a pretty good deal and figured a second viewing was going to kind of seal the deal whether I truly liked it or not, and clearly I did.
All right.
So
here we are. Gemini came out. If you look at IMDb, it says 2018.
Sounds about right.
Roughly when I remember seeing the trailers. I didn't get to see it in the theater. I'd intended to, and it came out during a window when I did a lot of travel for work, so I never quite made it out to go see it. I was excited because of, you don't get that many, obviously, noir movies hitting the screen that it was advertised that way. And it had the advantage of having John Cho, who I think is a fine actor. So I was all set to see it, but I had somehow never seen it until you brought the Blu-ray over.
Yeah.
So why this movie?
Well, I thought it was a good example of a modern-made noir that, at least I felt, didn't hit you over the head with the fact that it was a modern noir. To me, it didn't feel like, didn't have a lot of throwback language or, it's got a pretty hip jazzy score, but it's not quite the brassy horns and things like that you might expect out of noir. So I thought it was an interesting one to do for our first modern noir. And then as I was rewatching it, I really thought it ended up pairing very well with Laura.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Which I didn't really think about kind of the first go around, but or what I initially thought of it. But this time I was like, oh, there's some pretty interesting similarities here with...
We're going to spoil the movie, so don't worry about it.
And this time I'll give it a pause before I spoil it in case anybody wants to stop. With... really kind of women shot in the face and unknown identities of bodies for, in this film at least, the majority of the runtime, really. So I thought that was a really interesting parallel that was not intended at first.
Yeah, I definitely had the same thought as I was watching the movie. I don't know if I would have immediately made that leap. With if it had not been one of the last noir movies I'd watched.
Yeah.
But it's unmistakable when you watch it. And I found it interesting when I was going through a few reviews to kind of see what a few of the top critics on Rotten Tomatoes had said. And none of them really made that comparison, which kind of blew my mind. Well, I only read like 4 reviews, but...
Well, earlier today I was just kind of reading a bunch of mainly a lot of user reviews on Letterboxd and read some, kind of skimmed through some critic reviews. Yeah, I was pretty surprised as well that Laura was never mentioned.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's. Do you want to give a little plot synopsis?
Sure. Takes place in modern Hollywood, and it's about what's supposed to be a pretty famous actress and her assistant. And after one night, the assistant wakes up to find the actress has been shot in the head in the actress's home, and the assistant is kind of the main suspect. And a lot of it is her trying to figure out who might have killed the actress.
Right. So a lot different from Laura, but similar to some other detective movies, noirs, thrillers, whatever you might have seen. Someone who is believed to be the suspect has to basically go figure out who really did it in order to clear their name. And it does have this twist at, I think it was an hour and 15 into an hour and 30-minute movie, where it becomes you find out that was not actually the person who was murdered. Now, I will say this movie also has, unlike Laura, has a ton of setup at the beginning before you get to the murder. Where you get, instead of like in Laura, where it's all through kind of people telling stories about themselves who are kind of the bank of suspects, you kind of get your bank of suspects through the kind of conversations and experiences of the woman to be murdered and the assistant, kind of their evening before the death. So that is different if we're comparing and contrasting, as if a high school English class.
And then chapter 3, here's how they're similar.
But yeah, it is different, definitely, in that way. And she's not a detective, and so I do have a question for you, because it was something that came up in a review I read. That one of the reviews I read that was a positive review said, "Well, this is a comedy," which they found this movie hilarious, and that was like dryly hilarious. Like, they're like, you're not getting, like, all the jokes are all these like super subtle things, and I was like, I'm not sure that's the movie I watched.
That is definitely not the movie I watched either. I mean, there's humor in it, but I definitely wouldn't call it a comedy by any stretch.
They never quite said it was a comedy, but they just kept talking about how witty and funny it was because of all of these like sort of millennial social cues that I'm being fairly squarely a Gen Xer. Maybe I just missed. But yeah, I'd be curious to ask someone who's like 28 if they thought this movie was a laugh riot or not.
Yeah. I thought a lot of the reviews that I read that were a little on the negative side kind of complained that there was no big twist, or that the movie was slow, which I don't know. Those are kind of some of the things that I ended up really liking about the movie. Like, I liked that it didn't feel the need to like really present itself as like a quote unquote noir with, a lot of guessing and kind of red herrings and twists. So at least I was never guessing throughout the movie who killed her or what happened, which may have been a different experience for you.
Yeah, I will say I had a very different experience watching the movie. I mean, I'm not going to say I thought it was a rocket sled of adventure. It definitely has a deliberate pace. They're trying to do something with setting mood and tone. They're trying to show an LA that's kind of, it's very like LA. Like, you can just almost feel them like whispering LA, like between every cutscene. And to some extent, that's a hard thing, right? It's like, honestly never spent any time in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
So I have no affection for a lot of the things that I saw, other than I know when I see independent films, those are the locations that they tend to want to use.
Right.
And so it's like, well, I recognize that cafe that's in every single movie. When they need to go to a diner, I recognize that there's still tiki bars in LA, and that's kind of a unique LA thing at this point. But as far as like setting up the suspects, I thought that was exactly what the first third of the movie was, until the movie star Heather gets killed. And then they go so far as to, in the second act, have her, not her because she's dead, sort of, not dead at all, but not on screen. But Jill, her assistant, is sitting down with one of the suspects, the movie director, who at that point felt a bit like an insertion of the director himself, writer-director, saying, here's how I think of it. And like, here's all the suspects and here's how you should think of them. But part of the problem I had with the movie was, if you want to compare it to Laura, you never really got to know the suspects. Like, you kept hearing how crazy Devin was and this and that about Devin. And you finally meet Devin, and he doesn't seem crazy at all. He just seems like a guy who's like, why are you stalking me when I'm out on a date? Like, what are you doing? And then
he did collect coins, so that's
the act of a madman. And I mean, he didn't seem pleasant, but he didn't seem crazy. And then what they kept using for the motivation was, well, that person said they were going to kill her, but you have to understand they had also, unlike Laura, set up the person who'd been killed as being a royal pain in the ass. They never say it outright, but she's flaking on a film project, which is why the director's a suspect. She's just broken up with her boyfriend and living in his house, which was weird. And her, I guess, manager, I can never quite figure out who the woman in her 40s was. She was obviously some sort of professional relation to Heather, who shows up at the like Tea Garden restaurant. And she's just like, well, yeah, she was, a pain, and she was flaking on projects, and well, yeah, of course but none of those things to me seemed like murder, and
yeah.
And we never really get an explanation of what happened between her twin, the Gemini, which was a little bit of a giveaway there.
Yeah.
And in the one person, you're like, well, clearly it's her girlfriend, because they're not painting the girlfriend as being, and then you're like, oh, okay, well, I guess it's not, at some point we're just like, okay. But as far as like a murder mystery goes, it was kind of a weird one, because Jill doesn't have anybody to talk to through the thing. So she's not laying out anything. She goes on the run in a way that doesn't really make sense for somebody who's innocent. So anyway, it was just, I think stylistically and in a lot of ways I did appreciate it. In other ways, I was kind of like, they didn't really flesh this thing out as much as I would have liked.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's kind of one of the things that struck me that I liked and latched onto it when I first saw it, was it really wasn't what I was expecting. I kind of like the idea that, at the end of the day, Heather's just kind of this shitty person who shoots an intruder and takes advantage of it. And I mean, that's kind of when we talked about, like, what does noir mean, and obsession, and I mean, there's not really so much obsession in this, but just I thought it was interesting to have Heather be pretty unredeemable at the end of it, but not like a wildly terrible person. I mean, she does not feel too much remorse about killing somebody who's, I guess, maybe trying to break into her house.
Yeah.
right?
I mean, I kind of wish they'd clarified a little bit more what had happened there. And maybe I'm just a concrete thinker, but
Mm.
I was like, you never really know what the interaction was there. Like,
Right,
did he let
right.
her in the house and then kill her? Was that girl hiding in the house? Did she try and kill Heather or attack her because she thought she was with Jill? I thought at one point it was going to be that Tracy thought because Jill was sleeping in the same bed as Heather,
Oh, yeah.
that she'd killed her. But I was like, but there's not really a motivation there other than I'm breaking up with you. Like, why would you murder someone over that? They'd just gotten together, sort of thing. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, you clearly had a different opinion. I'd like to hear more about it.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I was just really struck by how at the end of this thing, it's just so like everything is so morally gray at the end of it. I mean, she just goes on, presumably Ricky Lake, and just kind of spins it in this story about herself. Really, I thought it was interesting to have this resolution that's not really a resolution.
Yeah, I will agree with that. I think having John Cho show up at the end and be like, "Can I just watch? Can I just see?" And he's still kind of keeping the needle on him. But yeah, they fully committed at this point, and Jill is definitely eagerly complicit in whatever is going on there at this point.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess another thing that I liked, and I felt like I had just been seeing so much kind of more modern noir that was kind of in the vein of like Last Seduction and Red Rock West, that were really not necessarily I guess those films really wore the genre on their sleeve. And I thought this was kind of almost like it felt like a movie that could have been plucked out of the late 40s to me. I mean, the plot didn't seem to be reflexive of the genre that it knew that it was. It just felt like this guy just wrote kind of a noir script and made it, and not a script that was quote unquote noir.
Yeah. It's interesting. Have you seen The Long Goodbye?
Yes. Yeah. And I think I've maybe seen that just for the first time within the last year or so.
Yeah, and I think that's a pretty good example of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
We're doing Raymond Chandler, everybody.
Yeah, and I really like The Long Goodbye.
It's
quite a bit.
It's a rock solid movie. I really liked it too. But yeah, it's this did feel like more pure, as in they were just doing what they were doing. We're not going to do like a ton of meta commentary. All the commentary is much more on celebrity culture, LA, what it is to be in Hollywood. One of the things I thought was interesting was even at the very, very end of the credits, they named the company, because usually if you're making an independent film, often you create a like limited liability corporation to basically just cover your butt so no one can sue you, the writer, director, or whatever, who's pulling the movie together. They can sue the corporation. And the name of the company was Hart Heather Productions. So he was even like, this telegraphing what's going on, even in the name of the company, I guess. But, he clearly had an idea about this. And to some extent, I think that's one of those things that left me feeling a little bit outside of the movie, was because it was so much about a certain angle of celebrity culture that I just don't really pay that much attention to. That was one of the things that in some of the reviews are like, this is perfect for the TMZ era. And I'm like, I've watched TMZ, but I don't really think about it.
Oh, sure.
So, but I did definitely get the reference to the horrible paparazzos following them around and kind of the pressure that Heather was under, and why she would, if you want to give her, a little bit of a silver lining as a character, why she would want to escape from everything for a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, just pure visually, I thought it was a really good looking motion picture. I enjoy it. I clearly like the movie. But yeah, it's watching it the second time around, and even the first time around, I think it's pretty, they lay on the stalker character a little thick. And then, towards the end, I don't necessarily think they needed any of the little flashbacks and things like that. When Jill, I think she's watching the broadcast where the police have confirmed that it's not Heather's body that they found. Some of those little conventions I could have done without. I think we would have figured it out on our own without having to see those flashbacks.
Yeah. There's not a it's not War and Peace as far as story goes. It's you would have, from the one clue they give, you would have been like, oh, okay, I get it. I understand what happened now.
Right.
But yeah, it did have those things in there. Yeah, it didn't necessarily bother me that they had that the stalker was like she was. With a few times I've seen even like weird things, like people interacting with like comic book writers or artists, which are not exactly rock stars. Like, people get weird. And I can only imagine if you saw your favorite, movie star or whatever, like at the diner you happened to be at that moment. But they didn't also necessarily set it up in any way that she was following her or would have had a hard time finding her. But I wanted to know a little bit more there. But whatever. It was not. It was not. Aside from what happened from the minute those two saw each other within the house, I didn't feel that empty. So. But yeah, it's written, directed by a guy who, Aaron Katz, out of the, whatever that North Carolina School of the Arts is, that produced also like David Gordon Green. And I guess he did a movie called like Landward Ho, and some other things, which was interesting because that was another thing in the reviews I was reading, was they were clearly giving the guy extra brownie points from having had previously made movies they like, which is always an interesting thing when you're reading a movie review. It's like, oh, he did this other great stuff. We like this too. And you're just like, you just spent a third of the review talking about how good his other movies are before you start talking about this. Yeah. I've not seen those works. So.
No, I am interested in, I forget his previous film, Cold Weather, I think it's called. That sounds pretty noir-y as well. I think it's about two guys looking for a missing girl. So, which, could be the plot to many, many, many noirs, and is.
Yes, it is.
So, yeah, but I not without its flaws, but I certainly enjoy the movie a lot. It really strikes me as it's kind of comfort food sort of movie. Like, between the look of it and the sound of it, I think it's got a really fantastic score. It's a movie that when it's on, I tend to let it play on, and if I'm vacuuming the house, it's kind of a fun one to put on. And John Cho is great. That guy's always good.
Yeah, I would have loved to have had. I don't know how you would have had more and not had it seem intrusive or interrupting the movie, but he's just so good. Yeah, I definitely could have done with more of him.
Yeah.
So as far as like we talked last time a bit about like what makes noir, like what is noir, and it's one of those things. I think you yourself described it as, I don't know, like you don't have a definition, but I know it when I see it.
Right.
And I think this definitely fits in with that, and not just because I think it reflects back one of the more famous noir. I think that there's a one of the two definitions that I usually work with. If this is the first time you've ever listened to this podcast, I also have like a written blog which you can suffer through at your peril. One of my criteria is usually obsession, which often leads to, or you can do it independently, someone who is, and this is usually also a kind of a thriller, right? But inexplicably now in over their head. And in circumstances, and you can have it either be something that's some fatal flaw of theirs. It can be an obsession. And I think in this case, I wouldn't say Jill is obsessed with Heather. She's more, there's a lot of CYA going on in this movie. But I do think that there's an aspect of, I need to know what happened. And I am putting myself in more and more peril instead of letting the courts figure this out and realize I had nothing to do with this. There are some really goofy circumstantial things that occur that definitely put her in the crosshairs. They're very hard to explain. But stuff like that happens in real life, and not that movies have to reflect real life, but she just has a little oopsie with a handgun at the beginning of the scene, and flash forward several hours later, and it's like, whoopsie, oh, by the way, there's gunpowder on your hand, and we know you said this is what happened, but so anyway, it's I think it definitely fits the bill as far as those kinds of noir movies, where someone's just the situation is just super grim, and it does not appear that there is a way out, and it can be some sort of, usually a character flaw that drives them to it. They're not just a hapless bystander who gets caught up in the action.
Another thing that I kind of going back to the idea of this is not really wearing its influences on its sleeve, really, is something I appreciated was I never felt like Aaron Katz was trying to outsmart the viewer. Like, there's a lot of noir, and even some that I like. I mean, I think The Last Seduction is a good one, where not that they're, who's that, John Dahl? Not that they're trying to kind of make the audience feel like they're dumb, but there's just so much convolution in these films. And again, I was just like, the first time I saw this, I was just really struck at how just kind of small and simple at the end of the day everything really was. And even the I guess kind of the red herrings throughout, like with the coins and things like this, I never felt like they were like, I never felt that the script was trying to pull one over on me by making me think it was going in another direction. I really kind of felt like, I don't know, more like I was in the Jill character's point of view, with just seeing these little things and trying to draw links about them versus, and I don't know if that makes sense. I mean,
no, it absolutely does.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think, it is detective fiction. She is detecting things to try and solve a crime. And I think one of the things they say about detective fiction when it's well done, and I quibble with this a little bit, but I do understand why they say it, is the solution when you get to it should be both totally obvious and a total surprise.
Oh yeah.
And I think this movie fits that to a T. because I think they really, really have you going with the red herring with Tracy. And then there's this moment of, oh, right, the name of the movie. So, right, I should have been thinking about that. So yeah, it's. I think it does do that very, very well, and I do like movies where people are suddenly forced to become detectives, in one way or another, and have to figure things out kind of on their own. This one in particular, she's on her own. She's not like going to her best friend or the pizza delivery guy we met at the beginning of the movie or anything. We are like, there's the concept of the fiction suit of that you step into that character. And I think that's pretty much what you described, is you're just kind of Jill's POV. I think the one thing that I had a really hard time buying from her POV was her decision to break into Devin's hotel room. It was like necessary for the plot, but it was like you would only give yourself, you'd be so terrified of what could happen, and hotel rooms are not exactly places people can hide, although that is what she successfully does here. That you'd know, I've got 20 seconds, maybe 45 seconds in and out of this room, of this hotel, and then I can't even be seen in the hallway, or the jig is up. So that to me felt artificial, but of the rest of most of the movie, not very, very much of the rest of it didn't. But it also, they needed to plant that clue to kind of drive the next steps forward. Right. So I bought it from that. But anyway, that's all I have. I don't have no notes about this movie. All I did was watch it, man.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean that's about all I got too. I mean, I would urge folks to check it out. I mean, if nothing else, it's a gorgeous movie and it's got a killer score.
I think everyone who's in it is really pretty strong. We've already kind of raved about John Cho, but the woman who's the lead, Jill, whose name was like Kirk.
Lola Kirk.
Yeah, she's really good. And I understand she's an indie darling of some sort that I don't know, because I mostly watch Avengers movies and movies from like 1952. So, but I thought she was really good. I look forward to seeing her in other things. So yeah. If noir that's black and white is just too hard to watch for keepers, this has lots of color in it.
Yeah. Do you like the color purple? Not the film, The Color Purple. But
I do. Is that noir too?
I like them both.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And we'll be back soon with doing another movie. And we have not, I don't think, picked one out quite yet, but we'll be back soon. And go out and check this one out.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. That about wraps it up for this edition of The Signal Watch, a production of the League of Melbotus. Thanks for sticking with us. If you enjoyed this podcast, we invite you to drop on by the Signal Watch blog, where you'll find write-ups of a wide variety of movies and more. You can drop comments on this podcast and let us know what you think. We do have a Signal Watch Patreon, and if you're so moved, we'd most certainly appreciate your support. We'll be back soon with more exceedingly high-quality content. So, until next time. God damn it, babies. You've got to be kind.